the hell are you doing, everybody? My name is Brain Smasher. Let's go through my metal CDs alphabetically. It's been a while since I did one of these videos where we're going through all my CDs, every fucking one of my CDs alphabetically. We've been getting into the early Ds. We're coming up on a year of my channel here on the 11th. Today's the 3rd, and we're only in the early Ds. So gonna be doing this till I'm probably about 40 years old, maybe 45 or so, and then I get sick of it and do something else. We're gonna be listening to killer riffs as always. This is Azaghals Suicide Anthems. This is actually a split with Beheaded Lamb, which is a side project of a dude from Acrebelts. These songs also appear on the compilation by Azaghal called Imizviha, and that 12-inch is fucking awesome, raging black metal with great riffs, great vocals, just finish razor sharp fucking black metal. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to report, so let's get into this. So, you know, this isn't all just metal. I'll just grab every single thing alphabetically, so, I don't know, a lot of metal, a lot of not. So the first one, not too pretty, but this is a band called Dawn Treader. No longer active. This is just a CDR demo. And this might have even been just like a thing that they made for friends. A friend of mine who I was in a band with, our band was called Cannibal Horse. He ran a label for a couple of years called Robot Winter. And I don't know how he found bands to sign or whatever, but he put on shows, had them, you know, tour through our state. You know, it's hard to get bands to come to Iowa, seriously. So it was cool that a band would come from out of state and party with us, have house shows wherever this dude lived. Sorry. We had so many great house shows. These guys would come through town about once a year, it seemed, and we would just party the fuck down. There was one party. We partied like all of Saturday night and stayed up till Sunday morning at 10 a.m. when we could buy alcohol again, and we just partied like well into Sunday afternoon. It was like a 24-hour long fucking party. So yeah, that was Dawn Treader. I guess you could say this stuff is like early Screamo kind of stuff. Not so early, maybe, you know, mid-era. I'm not really the biggest connoisseur of Screamo. There's just a lot of Screamo bands from around here, and I was friends with a few of them, and I listened to a couple of them, but I'm definitely not like an expert on the genre. Anyway, these guys were from Maryland, Baltimore, if I'm not mistaken. There's the logo for my buddy's label. But yeah, just real kind of DIY sort of stuff. They wound up putting out a 12-inch split with, I'll never remember, but that 12-inch split was pretty good, and this full length was pretty decent. Made some great friends out of those guys. One of them wound up being in a band called Nux Vomica, who just broke up. But I'm still friends with a lot of these guys. I mean, we're talking like 2002 or 3 or so, so this was quite a while ago. This CDR probably doesn't even play anymore, but I miss those guys quite a bit, and they, I don't know, I wish they would come back through town or reunite or something. They were great times. Anyways, next we've got Dead Congregation. This is the first EP they put out, Purifying Consecrated Ground. This came out on Conqueror Records in, once again, doesn't have the year. Every time I dare to save the year, like I know what year it came out, and I can just like quick cheat and look at the year, it's not fucking on there. I'm gonna guess maybe 2003, somewhere around there. The band really took a fucking 360 turn from this style. I find this EP to be just really average, but I bought it because this fucking album is a masterpiece. This is, for me, this was like a huge step forward in death metal for me, and it's not often that a death metal band comes along that I just am floored by and makes me pay attention to death metal again. These guys kind of took it, I guess you could say they kind of take like the Angel Corpse kind of thing, just like hyper fast, fucking brutal, but they also have this sort of like stoic sort of nature to them. I would say Angel Corpse is a lot more like shreddy all over the place with solos going left and right and a little bit more melodic maybe. These guys are just so fucking stern and beefy and mighty. Drummer's a fucking monster. I love this album so fucking much. Teeth into Red is probably one of the greatest death metal songs post 95, I'm gonna say. Teeth into Red is just a fucking masterpiece of metal. If I ever am stressed out, or if I'm leaving work or something, or if I just need to like collect all of my anger and just blow it out through my fucking ears and wash away into the drain, Teeth into Red just does that for me. It's it's got this absolute fury to it, and then it just like explodes out into this part where it comes into like a chorus of some sort of, I don't know, Greek vocals or something. These guys are from Greece. I don't know really what style they're going for here, but in the vocals. But anyways, it's an amazing album, amazing band. Album cover was done by the same person who did the cover of Deathspell Omega's Si Monumentum Requires Circumspice. Again, fucking Dead Congregation knocks it completely upside my head. This album shreds. This is so fucking good. Talking about just a fucking pummeling masterpiece, man. These guys are pretty big in death metal, but I honestly think they should be fucking kings of death metal as far as I'm concerned. This came out on Martyrdom. I would love to get this on LP, and also Graves of the Archangels if it ever came up for a decent price. Let's see, next. So this is Dead Infection's Chapter of Accidents. Probably their best album. Censored album cover. There's the real album cover. Just fucking pummeling fucking grindcore with, what do you call it? Just like slide riffs going all over the place. This is like the way grindcore ought to be, I think. Like kind of Carcass, they kind of take the last good era of Carcass and just roll with it. It goes a little bit faster and just pummel you into a pile. As far as I know, I think this is kind of worth some money. I've had it for quite a while. Another one is Brain Corrosion by Dead Infection. Really nothing wrong with this album. It's just not Chapter of Accidents. This came out in like 2002 or 3 or something, so it sounds a lot more modern than this one does. So I don't know. There's really not all that much difference from the two of them. This is a little a little bit more experimental, if I remember correctly. They're kind of toying with breakdowns and just kind of a little bit of variety, whereas this is just like full-fledged 100% pummeling your fucking face in grindcore with no time to deviate for anything else. So next I've got Dead Voices on Air. This is Piss Frond. This is a double CD set, and I really loved this when it came out. I was listening quite a bit and discovering electronic music back when this came out, around, I want to say 2000, of course I'm going to look and it's not going to say, I don't know, 2002? Actually, this says 97. That doesn't seem right. I'm still going to stick with my guns on 2002 to 2000, somewhere around there. Anyways, this is a solo project, kind of with helpers, by one of the members of Skinny Puppy. And at the time, I was just fucking head over heels for Skinny Puppy. Download, Aphex Twin, Coil, a little bit of that kind of stuff. I didn't really quite dive in like a lot of people tend to that kind of stuff. I felt like I dove in as far as I really needed to. But Dead Voices on Air was really good. It kind of has like a more organic approach to the genre. And in that way, it's a little bit more accessible. I think if I remember correctly, only one of these discs is really worth a shit. One of them is kind of boring. But yeah, I'm still glad I have this. I put it on every couple of years or so. Piss Frond. Next, this is Death Ambient. Now this came out on John Zorn's, I'm still not sure how to pronounce this label, Shattuck label. Everything that his label puts out has this sort of look to it. It's got like this gold packaging and like the gold bars along the side. I'm not sure what's with that aesthetic, but they crank out a shit ton of strange experimental sort of albums. And Death Ambient is one of the more interesting ones that I've found over the years. It's just a label that's impossible to keep up with. I imagine, I haven't really been aware of what they've been up to the last few years, but I bet they're cranking out to this day probably 5 or 6 to 10 albums a month. It's just impossible to keep up with them. Anyways, this is Death Ambient. It is, like it says, just ambient music. A lot of interesting sort of borrowed sounds and sampling going on. It's an interesting album, and I still put this on every once in a while when I'm into something interesting. I couldn't tell you who is in this. This is like the side project of somebody who's ordinarily in like a more normal band. Iko Mori, Fred Frith. That's the one. Fred Frith is in this. Fred Frith is one of my just total heroes in experimental music. So I think that's probably why I wound up picking this up for a couple of bucks used at some point. So that brings us to Death. One of, if not the greatest metal band there is. The greatest death metal band there is. Chuck Schuldiner was single-handedly created the genre with this album and a slew of other albums. He just continued to drive the genre forward into what it is today. And I don't know if you could say like black metal could be boiled down to one specific person. It was a couple of people and a couple of albums, and you can really go back and forth. But I think, as far as it goes, I think it's hard to argue that anyone but Chuck Schuldiner had such a huge play in the creation of the genre. And that's not to say that like the death metal wouldn't have happened without him, but it just gave it so much more gasoline on the fire. The debut, Scream Bloody Gore, this version is out on Combat. When I first got into metal, the death albums that I was listening to were Human, Individual Thought Patterns, and Symbolic. So these for me are a little bit more old school. And if you're learning about my taste through my videos, you probably know that I don't really reach back into the old school stuff all that often, this being like old school 87. That doesn't mean I don't think this album is a fucking masterpiece and cornerstone of the genre. It's just not that often that I reach for albums like that. And even when I do reach for a death album, it's usually going to be Human. I've been meaning to pop in The Sound of Perseverance just for fun. It's been a while. But also this one. I would say this is probably the best death album, but not my favorite. I think Human probably still tops it, but this album is a fucking masterpiece. Leprosy, everybody knows this fucking record. What is there to be said about it? Next, Spiritual Healing. I've probably only listened to Spiritual Healing maybe 10 times or so. I popped it in and I found it to be, a lot more melodic than I was expecting, a lot more kind of musical, and this kind of serves as the gateway to going from Leprosy to Human, which we'll talk about more in my next video. But Spiritual Healing never really hit the mark with me, and I've always meant to get back to it and give it a fair shake and just kind of figure out what my thoughts are on it. So I don't have really a lot to say about it other than that. But I'm happy to own a copy of it. I think I've got all of Death's albums except for the Live in Eindhoven 98 or whatever that is. I did wind up seeing Death live, luckily. Metal Fest 98, maybe 99, I want to say. It was pretty great. I wasn't really all that familiar with any of their older material, so I couldn't say they played this song, and this song. Metal Fests back in the day when I was first getting into metal, it was just overloaded the senses, because it was bands that I knew, albums that I owned, but songs that I didn't really know by heart. It had been a couple of years since I had gotten into metal, or 97 was my first Metal Fest, and that was when I first been listening to metal for 6 months, a year or so, somewhere around there. So it wasn't like I knew any of these songs by heart or anything. So by the time I saw Death live, I had only been listening to them for a year or two, so it wasn't like I knew every note of every song. I do just remember looking up at Chuck Schuldiner. I didn't really know, what kind of a metal god he was at the time. I just remember looking at him and watching him perform. He was an amazing performer and singer. It was amazing that he was playing these songs just so fluently and singing along, and it just really it really resonated with me that he was having such a good time as I looked up at fucking Chuck Schuldiner. A couple years later, I remember reading online that he had come down with some sort of brain tumor or something. And there was a charity going around, and I gladly sent him, I don't know, $50 or something to help him get through it. And I thought I remembered reading that he was fine, that he'd gotten through it and been treated and was going to live through it. And I remember thinking, fuck yeah, he did it. Thank God I had a part in being able to save Chuck from the pangs of death. And then a couple of months later, he was fucking dead. So, sadly missed guy. Definitely, set an example for how to be an amazing creative force in the genre and just an amazing, memorable person. So yeah, that's the end of my CD stack for the day. Thanks a lot for joining me. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you next time.